3 weeks. That was how long Jonas Calloway had been laying the same plate of beans and salt pork in front of his daughter Lily every evening, watching her push it around with her fork without complaint, watching her dark eyes go to the empty chair across the table and then away again, the way a person's eyes move from something that hurts to look at. 3 weeks since Mrs. Hannigan from the church had stopped coming by. 3 weeks since he had last heard a woman's voice inside these walls, soft and ordinary, asking whether anyone wanted more bread. The cabin was 14 feet by 16. He had measured it once with his own steps. In the evenings, it felt smaller than that. Lily was 5 years old, and she had her mother's mouth, the same serious set to it that could break a man without trying. She did not cry the way children cry for small things. She had already learned that crying did not bring her mother back, so she had set the habit aside. That broke Jonas worse than tears would have. He could answer tears. He did not know what to answer to that small, patient face across the table, waiting for something he could not name and was afraid he could not give. He was a big man, Jonas Calloway, broad through the chest, slow to speak, quick to work. He had built this homestead outside Meridian, Wyoming, by himself over 3 seasons, and he had never asked for help he did not earn. The land was good, the creek ran sweet, and in another year or two, he might call it prosperous. But a man cannot be a homestead by himself. He had understood that when his wife Clara died in childbirth with their second child, the baby gone too, both of them in the same cold hour. He had understood it again, deeper, every morning since. He rode into town on a Tuesday with Lily up in front of him on the saddle, her back straight, her braids done badly because he had done them. He went to the post office and he wrote out a notice in his careful, unpracticed hand. It took him 20 minutes and 3 pieces of paper before the words came out the way he meant them. Wanted, a capable woman for work and household on a working homestead near Meridian. Wages fair. The position could become permanent for the right arrangement. He nailed it to the post office board and rode home, and did not sleep until nearly morning. Mabel Forsythe read that notice on a Thursday, in between helping Mrs. Denny's youngest with a loose tooth, and listening to the station master tell her again that the eastbound train ran on Fridays. She had been in Meridian 12 days, which was 11 days longer than she had intended. She'd come west with her cousin Dorothy and Dorothy's new husband, riding as far as Wyoming before it became clear that 3 people and a single homestead did not divide evenly. No matter how kindly anyone pretended otherwise, Dorothy had cried. Her husband had offered money, which Mabel had refused. She had taken her carpet bag and her pride to the boarding house in town, and she had been trying to decide what to do with both of them ever since. She was 31 years old. She had kept house for her father through his illness, and for her uncle before that, and she had done it without complaint because it was necessary, and she was a practical woman. She was not beautiful in the way that made men stop walking. She was handsome, her mother used to say, and capable, which in Mabel's experience meant that people trusted her with difficult things, and rarely thought to ask if she was tired. Her hands were strong. Her temper was even. She slept well and rose early, and did not require much fuss. She read the notice twice and wrote the address down on the back of her train ticket, because that was the only paper in her pocket. She told herself she was investigating a practical matter, not making a decision. The road to the Calloway homestead was 4 miles of late October dust, and Mabel walked it because she had not wanted to spend the money on a hired horse. She arrived with her boots thoroughly grimy and her opinion of Wyoming roads firmly established. The cabin was small but solid. The barn was in better repair than the cabin, which told her something about the man. There was a child sitting on the porch steps, watching her come up the road with the frank curiosity of a 5-year-old. "Are you the woman from the notice?" the child asked. "I might be," Mabel said. "Is your father home?" "He's in the barn." The child studied her with those dark, serious eyes. "I'm Lily." I'm Mabel. How do you do?" "I do all right," Lily said, in a tone that suggested she was uncertain this was true. Jonas came out of the barn when he heard voices. He was wiping his hands on a rag, and he stopped when he saw Mabel standing at his gate, carpetbag in hand, looking at his property the way a buyer looks at a horse, honestly, without flattery, noting the good and the wanting both. He was not sure what he had expected. Someone older, maybe, someone who looked more settled. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "I read your notice. My name is Mabel Forsyth. I want to understand the terms before we discuss anything else." He liked that. He opened the gate. They sat at the table in the cabin, while Lily stationed herself in the doorway, ears open. Jonas had put on coffee without being asked, and Mabel noted that too. He laid out what the work was: cooking, keeping, the garden come spring, and helping with Lily's schooling since the schoolhouse was 6 miles, and winter was coming. He said the wages he was prepared to pay. He said there was a small room at the back that had been a storage room, but he had put a proper door on it and a window. Mabel asked 4 questions in sequence without preamble. Did the water run indoors or from a well? From a well, 20 steps from the porch. Was there a church within riding distance? There was, Sundays, 4 miles. What happened if either party found the arrangement unsatisfactory? He said he supposed they would part ways fair and square, no harm done. She asked the 4th question, and she asked it directly, looking at him. What happened to her mother? Jonas set down his cup. She died 14 months ago. Mabel nodded once, not with pity, but with the particular steadiness of someone who has carried loss themselves and knows its weight is real. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it plainly. Lily appeared fully in the doorway now. "Are you going to stay?" she asked. Mabel looked at the child, and then at the man who was watching her with an expression she recognized. Not hope exactly, but the careful way a person holds themselves when they are trying not to need something too badly. "I haven't decided yet," Mabel said. She looked at the room with its one good window, and then at the kitchen with its reasonable stove. She had slept in worse places for worse reasons. She thought of the train ticket in her pocket, eastbound, Friday. She thought of Dorothy's small tear-stained face and the husband's money, which she'd refused. "I'll stay through the winter," she said at last. "We'll see about the rest." Jonas Calloway nodded, as if she had said something that required no further celebration. "Supper's at 6, he said. "The child eats first." She unpacked only what she needed for 1 week. Her carpetbag sat in the corner of the small back room, still mostly full, the train ticket folded in the outside pocket. She told herself this was practicality. She told herself she was not a woman who made permanent decisions in November. The first thing Mabel noticed was that Jonas Calloway worked without stopping. He rose before the light, and she could hear the thud of the axe from before she'd put the coffee on, steady and unhurried as a clock. He came in for meals without complaint and ate what she put in front of him, and he said thank you every time, which was more than some men managed. He was not cold, exactly. He was contained, as though he had decided some time ago that whatever he felt was his own business and not meant for other people's tables. The second thing she noticed was Lily. The child was extraordinary in the way quiet children can be, gathering information with those serious eyes, storing it, making conclusions that were entirely her own. She did not attach herself to Mabel immediately. She watched. On the 3rd day, she asked Mabel if she knew how to braid hair in more than one way. Mabel said she did. Lily sat herself down on the kitchen chair and waited with the patience of a small judge, and Mabel braided her hair in the French style her own mother had taught her, and Lily went to the window to try to see the back of her own head, and could not, and had to trust that it was done right. "Papa does it in 2 straight plaits," Lily said. "It always comes out crooked." "I know," Mabel said. "I saw." She heard, from somewhere close to the wall, the sound of Jonas's footsteps stopping, then going on. The work was real work. She had known it would be. The well was a cold walk in the morning, and the stove had a temperament she spent 4 days learning. The stores were reasonable for a man who had been managing alone. Flour, salt, dried beans, a good cord of wood split and stacked with care. But there were gaps a man without a woman tends not to see. No vinegar, no extra candles laid up, no chamomile, which Lily needed once when she couldn't sleep, and Mabel had to make do with warm milk and a song she half remembered, sitting at the edge of Lily's bed in the dark while the child's breathing slowed. She went to town on Saturday for the supplies she'd identified. Jonas had given her the household money without hesitation, without counting it out in front of her, and that told her more than a long conversation would have. He drove her to town in the wagon and waited outside while she went into Deacon's store. Harold Deacon, who had the round, pleasant face of a man who liked other people's business, leaned on the counter and asked how she was finding the Calloway homestead. "Adequate," Mabel said. "Must be quiet out there," he offered. "Just the man and the little girl." People in town wondered how he'd manage. "He manages fine," she said, and put her list on the counter. Harold Deacon looked mildly surprised, and then wrote down her order without further commentary. On the way home, Jonas asked if Deacon had given her any trouble. "He asked questions," she said. "He does that. I told him you managed fine." Jonas looked at the road ahead. "I appreciate that," he said, after a moment. It was the most they had spoken in a single exchange since she arrived. That evening she made a proper stew, with the dried onions she'd found and the last of the potatoes, and put a pan of cornbread in the oven. And when she set it on the table, Lily looked at it with such open longing that Mabel had to turn away for a moment to collect herself. Jonas said grace, short and earnest, and served Lily first without being asked, and then waited until Mabel had filled her own bowl before he reached for the pot. Small things, but a person pays attention to small things when she is trying to decide what kind of man she is dealing with. The cold came down hard the second week of November, the way Wyoming cold comes, without warning and without apology. The creek froze along its edges. The wind found every gap in the cabin walls, and Mabel stuffed them with rags and old newspaper and the wool from a blanket that had worn through at the center. She found 2 gaps Jonas hadn't known about, one behind the stove and one near Lily's window, and she pointed them out to him after supper without making a production of it. Just, "There are 2 gaps you'll want to see to." He saw to them the next morning before dawn. She found them chinked tight when she went to put the coffee on. He had also, she noticed, put a new peg on the wall beside the back door, at exactly the right height for a woman's coat. He had not mentioned it. She hung her coat there and said nothing either. They were learning each other the way careful people do, in quiet, without declarations. Lily caught a cold in the 3rd week, and Jonas carried her inside from the barn wrapped in his own coat, her small face flushed and her eyes too bright. And Mabel saw what she had suspected. The man could build a homestead with his hands, and he could not think straight when his child was sick. He stood in the kitchen with Lily in his arms, looking at Mabel with an expression she had not seen from him before, something under the containment, raw and asking. "Set her on the bed," Mabel said. "I'll make a broth." He did. He sat in the chair beside Lily's bed, and he did not leave it. Mabel brought broth and a wet cloth for the child's forehead, and she showed Jonas how to change the cloth when it warmed, and he followed her instruction with the same precise attention he gave to everything. At some point, Lily fell into a genuine sleep, and the flush began to ease, and Jonas sat in the chair by her bed with his elbows on his knees and his head bent, and Mabel set a cup of coffee quietly on the side table and left him to whatever he needed to say inside himself. She was washing the broth pot when she heard him come into the kitchen. She did not turn around. She heard him stand there a moment. "I need to tell you something," he said. "All right," she said. "I wrote that notice," he said, "and I said I needed a housekeeper." That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. He was quiet for a breath. "I need a mother more than a maid," he admitted. She needs what I can't give her. I don't know how to say what that is exactly. I just know I can't be it, and I should have been honest about that from the start, and I wasn't, and I'm sorry." Mabel set down the pot. She turned around. He was standing with his hat in his hands, not looking at her with any sort of expectation, just standing there with the plain, bare fact of what he'd said. "You were honest enough," she said. "The notice said the position could become permanent for the right arrangement." That was a coward's way of saying it. "Maybe," she said, "but I read it clearly enough." She looked at him a long moment. He looked back. "Ask me what you want to ask," she said. He turned his hat once in his hands. "Would you consider staying? Not just through the winter. Staying proper. I'm not saying it has to be more than what it's been. I'd marry you if that made it right for you. I'd honor that agreement the way I honor all my agreements. Lily needs someone and He stopped. "I do too," he said, quiet as he could say it. Mabel thought about the train ticket in her carpet bag in the corner of the back room, still folded in the outside pocket, eastbound, Friday, uncollected. "I'll think on it," she said. He nodded as if that was more than he'd expected. He took his coffee cup and went back to sit with Lily. Mabel stood at the kitchen window in the dark and looked out at the frozen yard, and she thought about thinking on it, and she understood that she had, in fact, been thinking on it for weeks. The answer arrived not in a moment of decision, but in accumulated weight, the way a river cuts stone, not by one blow, but by the constant passage of water. It came in the mornings when Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, still warm from sleep, her dark hair tangled and her expression trusting, asking if there was porridge. It came in the evenings when Jonas read aloud from the almanac by the fire, his low voice filling the room, and Lily fell asleep against his arm, and Mabel sat across the way with her mending, and the fire snapped, and outside the wind moved across the prairie, and the cabin was warm, and it was simply, without ceremony, a home. She was not a woman who required romance. She was a woman who required truth and steady ground, and someone who meant what he said. Jonas Calloway, for all his silence, was the most honest man she had encountered. His hands built true, his word held. He never said a thing he did not mean, and he never meant a thing he did not do. In December, a man named Pruitt rode out from the land office in town with papers and an expression that belonged on a man serving bad news to someone else's family. Pruitt said there was a question about the southeast boundary of the Calloway claim, said a cattle concern out of Cheyenne had filed a counter-survey, said the creek might run on their side of the line. He said it in the careful language of a man who is sorry about the message but is going to deliver it all the same. Jonas listened without moving. He asked 2 questions. How long did he have and what was the process? Pruitt told him. Jonas thanked him, which seemed to surprise Pruitt, and showed him to the gate, which did not. He came back inside and Mabel was at the table with Lily, working on her letters. He said simply, "There may be trouble with the claim. I'll ride to town Monday." "I'll come with you," Mabel said. He looked at her. "2 people make a stronger case than one," she said. "And I can read a survey document. My uncle was a county clerk." He studied her face for a moment. "All right," he said. They rode in Monday. The land office smelled of old paper and pipe smoke. A thin man at a desk said the claim required either a marriage certificate showing domestic settlement, which was stronger under the homestead regulations, or a statement of continuous active residence over the full period. Jonas had the residence he had built every year, but the man across the desk had a counter-survey filed by men with a lawyer, and Jonas had himself and a woman who was not yet his wife, and a deed that was good but not unassailable. Mabel said, from the chair beside Jonas, "We are engaged to be married. The certificate will follow." She said it the way she might say the well is 20 steps from the porch, as a fact, stated plainly. Jonas did not look at her. He did not have to. The thin man at the desk wrote something down. He said they would hold the challenge in abeyance pending the marriage record. He said they had 30 days. They rode home in the cold. Halfway along the road, Jonas said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said. "You put yourself in a position." "I was already in the position," she said. "I just named it out loud." He was quiet for a mile. The horses moved through the gray afternoon light, breath misting. "Mabel," he said. "Jonas, is it what you want? Not the land claim, not the arrangement. I'm asking about you." She watched the road ahead of them, the long pale cut of it through the winter grass. She thought of the carpetbag in the back room. She thought of Dorothy's small house and the eastbound train and the life that had been waiting for her somewhere vague and unconstructed in the east. A life of service to someone else's family, probably, because that was the shape her life had taken, and she had not questioned it enough. She thought of Lily's dark eyes and Jonas's quiet thank you. Every single evening, and the peg on the wall at exactly the right height. "Yes," she said. "It's what I want." He let out a breath. She had not noticed he was holding one. They were married the following Sunday by Pastor Elam, who was plain-spoken and brief about it, which suited them both. Lily wore her best dress and held Mabel's hand through most of the ceremony with the earnest solemnity of a child who understands that something real is happening and wants to be present for it. Harold Deacon was there, and 3 neighboring families, and Mrs. Hannigan from the church, who cried quietly and told Mabel afterward that Jonas Calloway was a good man and she was glad someone had seen it. Mabel said she had seen it well enough. That evening Jonas built up the fire and they sat at the table, the 3 of them, and Mabel had made a proper supper, and Lily fell asleep in her chair before the plates were cleared. Jonas carried her to bed. He came back and stood in the kitchen doorway. "There's something I want to show you," he said. He led her to the back room, her room, the small room with the good window. He had been in there that afternoon, she now understood. Against the wall, beside her carpetbag, stood a new shelf, solid pine, fitted true to the wall. Beside the shelf was a second chair, a proper one, better than the one that had been there before. "You only had the one hook on the wall and nowhere to put your things," he said. She looked at the shelf. She looked at the chair. She looked at her carpetbag in the corner, still half full, the outside pocket where the train ticket lived. She picked up the carpetbag and she set it on the bed, and she unpacked it, all of it, her spare dress, her books, her mother's small mirror, the letters she kept. She folded the train ticket once more and set it on the shelf, not to keep it as a door, but to remind herself she had chosen to close it. Jonas watched from the doorway. He did not say anything. He didn't need to. She put the last book on the shelf and turned around. "Good night, Jonas," she said. "Good night, Mabel," he said, and he meant it full, the way a man means something when he has stopped being afraid it might be taken from him. There is an old truth the frontier knew well, and it is this: a home is not built by the cutting of timber or the laying of stone. It is built by the small, faithful acts that say, "I am still here, I see you. Your cold is my cold and your fire is mine." Jonas Calloway built his house with his hands, and it was good, but it was Mabel Forsythe who turned it into something a child could sleep safely in, and a man could come home to, without feeling the silence close in behind him like a door. She came with one carpetbag and a return ticket she never used. He offered wages and called it a practical matter when what he meant was, "Please stay." Lily knew from the first day, the way children know things that grown people take months to see clearly. And so here is a question for you, friend, sitting with me tonight. Have you ever held on to a ticket you never meant to use, a way out kept close, just in case, until the day you finally set it down and found the staying was the truest choice you ever made? Tell me in the comments what you think. Have you ever chosen to stay somewhere that surprised you into belonging? If this story warmed you tonight, please subscribe and come along for more journeys through the old frontier. The people who were stubborn enough to love each other through hard winters and harder silences. We have more tales where this one came from, and I'd be glad of your company. Good night, God bless, and may you always find the place worth staying.